Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight's video features 3 unsettling stories where something looks human but clearly isn't. These are stories about people who fit perfectly into everyday life until you're the only one who notices that something is wrong. Huge thanks to the authors for sharing their work. Get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's get into some terrifying Reddit horror stories. I almost missed it altogether, buried as it was under all the junk mail and pre-approved credit card offers. The announcement was printed on a 7 by 5-inch piece of white cardstock. The right side featured a photo of a couple, while the left bore a simple message in a plain font. Just married. David and Emma. June 6th. Acadia. I read that strangely unceremonious message twice as I stood in front of my mailbox, trying to recall how I knew the couple. The only David I knew was my brother, who was not only single, but perhaps the most single man I've ever known. I looked over to the photo of the happy couple, and I am not being hyperbolic when I say that my jaw dropped. The man in the picture was in fact my younger brother. He was strolling down the beach, hand in hand with a young woman, both of them caught mid-laugh. He gazed adoringly at the woman, at Emma, I guess, who was covering the top half of her face with her free hand. I thought it was strange that she'd be obscuring her own eyes in a wedding announcement photo, but the card itself was so strange that I didn't dwell on her pose. The announcement was either a prank, which would have been remarkably out of character for my humorless sibling, or David had subverted my every expectation and eloped. Once I got past the initial shock of the card, I went back inside, tossed the junk mail, and gave David a call. It was evening where he was, but not so late that he would have been asleep. He picked up after 6 rings. Well, mazel fucking tov, I told him, squinting down at the woman's face. Huh? Who's the lucky gal? He paused, clearly trying to puzzle out my question. Then, what the hell are you talking about, man? Okay, so it was a prank. If he had secretly gotten married and wanted to hide it from his family, then he wouldn't have mailed me an announcement. From the confusion in his voice, I figured he wasn't in on the joke. It sounded like one of his friends pulled one over on him. I explained the situation, then sent him a photo of the card. Instead of laughing it off like I expected, David got so quiet I thought the call had dropped. He eventually said he had no idea who Emma was, nor who had sent me the card. Sure, some of his friends were pranksters, but how would any of them have gotten my address without David's knowledge? He said he'd ask his friends about it, and requested that I see who else had received the wedding announcements. Up until that point, I had still thought of the card as a harmless joke, but the severity of David's reaction put me on edge. Maybe there actually was some woman in his life that, for whatever reason, he didn't want people knowing about. After the call, I texted my parents and a few of our family friends. One of my old neighbors had indeed received the card and seemed a little disappointed when I revealed it was only a prank. My parents checked their mailbox upon my request, and only then did they find the announcement. Thank God I called before they could discover it on their own. I genuinely think my mom would have had a heart attack. So far, those are the only 2 households that have received the cards, and I found it bizarre that David's friends knew either of those addresses. Before I fell asleep, I texted David my update. He said he had yet to find the culprit and planned to continue his search in the morning. Again, I was somewhat perturbed by his seriousness. Was I missing something? I spent the next few hours trying to figure out who his bride could have been. In doing so, I quickly started to feel like every other woman on earth was named Emma. There were so many significant women in mine and David's lives who bore that name that sorting through them all seemed pointless. There was, for example, our childhood friend and neighbor who David harbored an unrequited crush on for years until her family moved away. There had been a tragic incident at her high school in which an Emma in David's year fell headfirst behind some lockers, dying from positional asphyxia. I had dragged David along to a rager at an Emma's house in college, which had ended in both of us spending a night in jail for public intoxication. Apparently, my life was just one big stream of Emmas, and none of them seemed to plausibly linked to the marriage announcements. Now, here's the part of all this that I'm still struggling to make sense of. The night after I called David about the card, I woke up in the middle of the night to my phone ringing. I checked the caller ID and saw that it was David. I assumed he was calling me about the stupid prank, and part of me wanted to ignore him until the morning. Then again, he could have been having some kind of emergency, so I picked up the phone and grumbled "what" into the mic. There was silence for a few seconds, and then I was shocked to hear a woman's voice on the other end. "Hello," said the voice, quiet and slow and unmistakably feminine. I sat up in bed. "What? David? Who is this?" I double-checked the screen and confirmed it was in fact David's number. Another long pause, and then, "Yes, this is David's apartment." After that, the caller hung up. Disturbed, I called David back immediately, but no one picked up. I sent him a text asking who had just called, then called him 3 more times. No one picked up, and I was starting to panic. Yeah, I know the most likely explanation was that he simply had a woman over, but something didn't feel right. I guess David's paranoia was rubbing off on me, because I was so weirded out that I actually phoned David's buddy Mike, who lived in his same apartment building, and made him do a wellness check for me. When Mike got to the apartment, my brother was asleep inside, perfectly safe and sound. He didn't have anyone over, and there were no signs that anyone had broken into his apartment or messed with his phone. And yet, I hadn't imagined the call, at least not entirely. According to the phone logs, there had definitely been an outbound call from David's phone to mine. He had no memory of calling, and even if David had a history of sleep talking, which he doesn't, the voice certainly didn't sound like a man impersonating a woman. I'm at a complete loss. I tried giving the card a more thorough look this morning, trying to see if I'd glossed over some clue. The longer I stared at the woman in the photo, the more creeped out I got. Why was she covering her eyes? If someone had gone through the trouble of creating fake couple photos, why not give Emma a more natural pose? Frankly, I could only look at the marriage announcement for a few seconds at a time before I had to put it down. Maybe that's why it took me so long to realize that the woman's mouth had been flipped upside down. I went to my cousin Ava's wedding a few days ago. I'm still processing what's happened. I'll try to get everything out as best I can. Ava has been dating some guy named Ethan for the past year. Being in their 30s, they sort of fast-tracked the whole marriage thing. I'd never met the guy, and I hadn't spoken to Ava in a few years, but what the hell, it was guaranteed to be a fun time. The groom walked down the aisle first, a tall, pale man in a dark suit. He stood at the front of the church and smiled. He smiled when Ava walked down the aisle. He smiled as they kissed, after being pronounced husband and wife. He smiled as they walked out of the church. It didn't strike me as weird until we got to the reception. When they entered, he was still grinning that wide grin, with his perfectly white, straight teeth. But up close, it looked, I don't know, wrong somehow. He wasn't really engaging with guests. He wasn't talking or laughing. He was just sort of scanning the place, staring, grinning wide without it really reaching his eyes. I guess he's smiling for the camera, I told myself. Or maybe he's a little socially awkward, and he figures nothing will go wrong if he just keeps smiling. It got really weird, however, when they served dinner. I watched him sitting at the sweetheart table with Ava, shoveling chicken piccata into his mouth as he still grinned, barely opening his mouth wide enough to get the bite, immediately closing it, making loud chewing noises as he chewed, while grinning. Have you ever seen someone chew their food while grinning? It is completely unnatural looking. Smiling with your mouth closed, sure, but showing all your teeth grinning as you chew? It was so weird. They eventually came to our table to say hi. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his face. He was still grinning. His wide blue eyes were jittering from person to person at the table. His face looked like a mask. There was no warmth. It was like looking at a statue. I whispered this to my sister once they left. There's something seriously wrong with him. Why is he smiling like that? My sister thought I was being a catty old maid. Well, old mister. Shut up. He looks fine. No, he doesn't. He looks like he's madly in love, she snapped back. Stop being jealous. Geez, Matt. That hurt. It honestly did. None of the other guests seemed to think anything was wrong. They thought it was all fine. Him grinning through the first dance, through the speeches, through the champagne toast. He tilted the champagne flute into his grinning mouth without spilling a drop somehow. This is so weird. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but that was my first mistake, not realizing he had disappeared from the dance floor. As I was washing my hands, a stall door swung open behind me. In the mirror over my shoulder, I saw Ethan standing there. His skin looked milky white in the bright lights. His blue, bulgy eyes stared at me, and he was smiling. I don't mean that he saw me and then smiled. No, when he opened the stall door, he was already smiling. He walked over and began washing his hands at the sink right next to me, even though there were 3 other sinks. Our shoulders bumped. "Great wedding," I mumbled, trying to be friendly. He turned to look down at me, slowly. His blue eyes bored into mine. My heart began to pound. "Music's great too," I said nervously to fill the silence. He just stared at me. That's when I realized he hadn't said a single word the entire wedding. There were no vows. He just nodded when the officiant asked if he took Kava as his wife. He didn't thank the best man after the speech, and I hadn't even seen him talking to Ava at the sweetheart table, just smiling and staring. I backed away. His eyes tracked me as I went. Just as I reached the bathroom door, he stretched up to his full height and stared down at me. He looked even taller than he had in the reception hall somehow, under the fluorescent lights. Then he stopped smiling. As his face relaxed, his cheeks sagged, his forehead drooped. The skin of his face began to shift and slide. I froze as his face began to pull and separate from his skull. He grinned, and everything stretched back into place. I finally leapt into action and darted out the bathroom door. I went back to my sister and grabbed her arm. "We have to get out of here," I breathed. "Ethan, he's—" "Will you shut up already?" she said, barely even looking at me. And then Ethan sauntered in, long legs taking him smoothly across the dance floor. He slowed as he passed our table on his way back to Ava. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. It's been 3 days. The skin of my shoulder is pulsing with pain, like it's infected somehow, and I can't help but notice every time I look in the mirror, my face looks a little saggier, a little looser, like it isn't quite attached the same way anymore. So I've started smiling more, just to hold everything in place. I don't know when Facebook introduced a feature, friend suggestions, it used to be called, but now it's people you may know. A bunch of Facebook profiles suggest it to you to add as friends, usually people who have a mutual friends with you or someone you've searched for in the past. What creeps me out is how accurate it is. It's clearly taking data from somewhere because it suggested people to me that I've only ever interacted with in real life. The woman that cuts my hair or the guy who does my taxes at H&R Block. Sometimes, though, it really is a random person that Facebook thinks I know for some reason. That's what happened on Thursday evening. A new friend suggestion. A.R. Winters. No mutual friends. No apparent connection to me. But this one caught my eye for a few reasons. First, the photo was of poor quality. It looked like a photo from the 90s, something that had been developed on real film and then scanned or photographed. Second, it had been taken from far away. The man, or possibly woman, was wearing dark clothing, standing against a tree. So far away, I couldn't make out their face. It didn't occur to me until just then, but generally, profile pictures aren't taken from that far away, unless they're traveling and showing off some landmark. But this person was just leaning against the dead tree. Out of curiosity, I clicked their profile. All their info was hidden though. No cover picture, no other profile pictures, no about me info. The next time I loaded Facebook, he wasn't a suggested friend anymore. It was just a usual never-ending wheel of 30-something women that had a smattering of mutual friends with me. So I forgot about it for a few days. Until they popped up again. People you may know. A.R. Winters. The same photo of them leaning against the dead tree. Or was it? As I stared at the photo, I realized they were standing straight up, no longer leaning. I could have sworn... I shook my head. They were so far away. How could I tell whether they were leaning on the tree or just standing underneath it? Later that night, I checked Facebook again. People you may know. A.R. Winters. One mutual friend. I froze. One mutual friend? The mutual friend was some girl I went to high school with. I didn't know her well. We'd been close in the 8th grade, but then she started hanging out with the more popular girls and we lost touch. Still Facebook friends though, because I never went through my list of 2,000 plus people and pruned some off. It didn't say he had a mutual friend with her before, so they just became Facebook friends. Like today. This evening. Maybe there's someone from our school. Maybe they just joined Facebook for the first time now, or maybe they lost their password to their old account and are creating a new one. A few more days passed and I didn't see A.R. Winters show up in my feed. But then on Saturday night, there they were. People you may know. A.R. Winters. 3 mutual friends. Not 1, 3. And the photo was definitely different. It was still the dead tree, the overcast sky. Everything looked exactly the same, except the person. They weren't against the tree anymore. They'd taken a few steps closer to the photographer. They appeared to be a woman, tall and pale, dressed in a flowy black shirt and long black pants. Wavy long dark hair parted neatly on the left side. Because of the film quality, I still couldn't make out her face. Who is she? I glanced at our mutual friends. One was a guy I had chemistry lab with in college, and the other... no. The other was our English teacher, Mrs. Flowers. She'd been the teacher mentor of our literature club, and she'd been dead for 5 years. I sat there staring at the screen, all of it slowly sinking in. Her account can't even accept new friend requests. And why would this random person friend request her anyway? A horrible, creeping dread tugged at the back of my mind. I clicked on the 2 other mutual friends, Jessica Marie and Michael. Scrolled down their timelines and, oh shit, they'd also passed away. There hadn't been any official announcement for either, but their timelines were scattered with messages like, I miss you, and 2 years since you've been here. Quick Google searches show that Jessica Marie died in 2020 from complications of COVID, and Michael had died in 2023 in a motorcycle accident. I clicked back to my feed, to the friend suggestions, to AR's profile. I froze. She was standing closer. Much closer. Her face was pale, almost pure white, like all the blood had been sucked out of it. Her eyes were dark, pupil and iris indistinguishable, and they seemed too big for her eyes. She had no eyebrows. Her long, dark hair twisted around her as if there was a terrible wind. Blip. I jumped. There was a little red one over the bell icon. A.R. Winters sent you a friend request. My hands began to shake. I stared at the 2 buttons, confirm, cancel. I clicked cancel, closed out of the window, slammed the laptop shut. I sat there in the dark, panting. Sweat covered my arms. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Calm down. It's obviously just some stupid prank. The photo's probably not even real. AI. I pushed out a breath and got up, put on my hoodie, left the apartment, and went for a walk. I shoved my hands in my pockets and walked along the walking trail at the local park. My breath came out in clouds of mist. I shivered. It was almost dusk and the street lamps glowed across the road, orange amber. Then I stopped. I had never noticed it before. At the edge of the park, there was a big oak tree, barren of leaves now. But it looked just like the tree in A.R. Winter's photo. A million trees look like that. Stop it. As I stood there staring, something peeked out from behind it. A pale white face, dark flowy clothing, barely visible in the dying light. But I knew it was her. I knew. I ran back home, locked my apartment door, and opened the laptop. Went to Facebook. A.R. Winters sent you a friend request. The profile photo. Her face filled the entire photo, right up against the screen, like she was staring right at me. And maybe it's just the stress, but I feel sick. Really sick. I've thrown up twice in the past half hour. My stomach hurts so much, more than I ever remember it hurting before. And I can't help but think, am I next? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, when did you first realize something wasn't human? Stay safe.